Hi, welcome to the Calico Cat Quilt Shop's first ever virtual quilt along. With this quilt along, we are going to be making a pattern called Soundwaves. This is what the pattern looks like. This shows several different colorways and several different ways that you could make the pattern. This version does either a 23 by 64 inch runner or 32 inch by 46 inch small throw, or a little bit larger 48 by 57 and a half throw. And they also have a pattern for a larger throw, and there's a couple of different ways shown here, a couple of different ideas. And this throw is 64 by 69. So this is week 1, and we will talk a little bit about color selection and cutting directions and get started on the cutting. And I'm testing out a completely new way of doing the video, so please bear with me. I'm a one-person show, so we will get started. As you can see, the idea is that you'll get some high contrast as you go across the quilt from the background and these sound waves that it makes. And you can pick lots of different colors. You can see here, this is a nice rainbow with a white background. And so this lends itself to a lot of a real scrappy look if you want to do that. Or you could do it with as few as 2 colors and still get the same effect. This one, the larger throw, shows a couple of different ideas where on this one at the top, they used a light color background, and down here they used a darker color background. So you'll want to just decide which way you're doing it, and then you'll have to kind of pay attention to the directions depending. Obviously on this one, if you're reversing the lights and darks, you're going to kind of have to reverse the directions too. So, and regardless of which version you decide to make, the layout's going to be similar. I mean, you're still going to follow the sound wave type of pattern, and there's still only going to be 2 different blocks. One of the blocks has 2 variations, basically a left side and a right side, and then there's this other block that's basically just 4 strips with a couple of squares on the top of them, and you'll be flipping those up and down depending in order to get this pattern. So kind of a neat idea, and I can show you in the directions. You're pretty much going to be doing half of a log cabin. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and a lot of nice straight seams to practice with, especially if you're a beginner, or if you're a little bit more experienced, a lot of straight seams to just practice with. And let's get into the cutting directions then. For this quilt, you'll be using 2.5 inch strips. So you can either buy 2.5 inch strips that are pre-cut, or you can choose to cut your own from yardage. It's not going to make any difference. It's just a matter of how you get the strips. If you want to make your own 2.5 inch strips, it's really not that difficult. Get switched over here. All you need is a ruler, and there's a lot of different kinds of rulers out there. This one is a 6 inch by 24 inch ruler. I've got a safety guard on mine because I do an awful lot of cutting. This ruler works great if you're using width of fabric. There are several different kinds of slotted rulers on the market that have a place for your rotary cutter to go right in between, and you can measure off your 2.5 inches, or however you need to do it. This one is from Creative Grids. It's called a Stripology Ruler. There's 3 different versions of this. There's nothing that's the full width of fabric though, so you end up having to fold over. But really, really convenient for getting nice 2.5 inch strips, and you can cut several 2.5 inch strips before you run out of ruler. So, newer options that are nice to have. Or if what you have is a shorter ruler, this is a 6 by 12 inch ruler, then you just fold your fabric over, and I can kind of show you here a little bit. I'm going to be using batiks for my quilt. I've actually got 2 sets of batiks that I'll be using for demonstration purposes. But essentially what you want to do is get your fabric folded so that it's shorter than the 12 inches. And make sure you get everything parallel, however you decide that you need to do it. So your folded edges need to be exactly parallel from each other to get a nice straight strip. And then you would square up your end and start cutting 2.5 inch strips, and just measuring off on your ruler. And this is where ruler stickers can be really handy, because you can mark your 2.5 inches and get a real consistent 2.5 inches without having to worry too hard about missing your mark. So I'm going to go ahead and use my 6 by 24 inch ruler and show you it would be nice if this fabric didn't have a crease in it. So I'm going to iron it out just a little bit here. Make things a little bit easier on myself, hopefully. I'm just spraying with water. I'm just trying to get everything laying flat. And I have pre-cut some 2.5 inch strips that I'm going to use for the middle of the quilt. This is actually what I'm going to use for binding. The smallest quilts, either the runner or the small throw is what I plan to do. They both use a total of 20 strips. You'll want 9 strips of light and 11 strips of dark if you're picking them out, or if you've got a roll that you've purchased of 2.5 inch strips, you'll want to sort out what you think are the 9 lightest and the 11 darkest strips, unless you want to reverse it, of course. The medium-sized throw uses 19 light strips, 23 dark strips for the quilt, and then the binding is another 12 strips. And I should have mentioned that the small throw, you need 5 strips for the binding. If you're doing the runner, and the rectangular throw, you need 4 strips. And then the larger size, the 64 by 69, you're going to use 32 strips of light and 40 strips of dark, and you need 8 strips for the binding. Okay, now I've got things a little easier for myself here. And what I'm going to do is square up the ends so that I've got a nice straight edge and both sides of the fabric are even. Then I know I've got a really good place to get started cutting. Just hold my ruler down firmly and cut. And then I'm going to line my 2.5 inch line up as close as I can. And since I have a straight line to start with and I didn't move my fabric at all, I should have a nice even 2.5 inches all the way across. And I know I'm going to need 4 of these strips, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut all 4 of them now. And get it lined up again. And if you feel like you're not getting it straight, you can always square it up again. If you feel like the 2 sides are not even, or if you feel like you might have slipped, the ruler might have slipped a little bit, you'll want to square off the end again. And this is where, if you've got like the Stripology Ruler or something, I could just have this lined up and just cut, cut, cut. So it's a little bit faster and more efficient. And I'm going to cut 1 extra strip just in case I change my mind and decide to do the runner instead, since I've got my fabric all lined up and nice and straight. Okay. Once you have all of your strips together that you need, if you haven't already decided which ones are going to be your lights and which ones are going to be your darks, now's the time to do that. So we're going to take a look. This is the collection of batiks that I'm using for one of my sets. And if you get pre-cut rolled, this is kind of what you'll see probably, a bunch of different fabrics. Most pre-cut rolls come in with 40 fabrics, whether or not any of them are doubled up or not. And what I need to do now is decide which ones are going to be my lights and which ones are going to be my darks. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This one is kind of in between green and purple. 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm not sure, and this is one of those things that you got to maybe play around with and decide a little bit. What I'm trying to decide is if I want to use the ones with more green in them as one of the colorways, and then this 11 as the other colorway, and just know that that's what I'm doing. Or if I want to go with, say, all darks and all lights. So I'd maybe take, there's 5. 7, 8. I'm going to have a hard time getting 11, I think. 9. And once you get down to kind of your medium variations, it's going to get a little subjective. It's going to be a matter of eyeballing to see, now should I make this a light? Should I make this a dark? Where is it going to fit in better? And I don't know that there's a wrong answer, and I don't know there's a right answer or wrong answer, either way. So I could go like that. I'm honestly leaning towards doing all the purples together and all the greens together and getting my contrast that way. And maybe I've got this bundle of batiks that I've also going to use for demonstration. This one runs between dark purples into dark blues and a black with some print on it. So that's pretty dark. So maybe what I'll do is this one I'll do the purples and the greens, and this one I'll do straight lights and darks. This one seems like it might be easier to pick out my lights and darks. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 darks, 6, 7, 9, 'You get the idea though. Kind of play with what you've got for color combinations, and maybe even lay things out a little bit before you start cutting and decide where everything's going to be. So then we're going to get into the cutting. So what I'm going to do is make my decisions, and then I'm going to do some pressing my strips together, which I guess I could do with these. Get my greens back together and my purples back together. And get some of this out of the way. So the tip that I got last week that was new to me was that if you've got a lot of strips that you're going to cut the same length, or any fabrics for that matter, press them together. I'm going to iron this one out a little bit, get some of the wrinkles out. But cottons together will stick to each other a bit, and if you press them, they'll stick even more. So then you won't have so much trouble keeping them together when you try to cut. I thought that was pretty handy. What I'm going to do here is just press and not iron, because I don't want to stretch anything. I just want them to be a little bit more inclined to be bonded together. And you can get, if your rotary cutter is not dull, you can get quite a few piled up here, make things a little bit more efficient for you if you have them all stacked up and ready to go. So I'm gonna get my lights and darks stacked together, and then I will be right back. I've gone ahead and I've gotten my strips all pressed out together, so they're all lined up and ready to cut. And then what I want to do, because I decided to do purple for my 11 strips and the greens for my 9 strips, I'm just going to go ahead and circle my 11. I'm using a purple pen, so that'll kind of remind me. And then put down that I'm using green, just because I don't want to forget which way I'm going. So dark strips, purple. Light strips, green. Don't want to get halfway through and then realize you've cut the wrong colors. What I need to do first with my cutting is I'm going to square everything up here. I'm just going to take the selvage edges off, and I can do that on both sets, and then I'm ready to get started. You can see I'm going through quite a few layers, but they're not shifting too bad. And then I can cut them all at the same time. Just take your time if you've got lots of layers. So, and this, you may have, if you're doing the bigger sizes, you may end up having 2 stacks of lights and 2 stacks of darks, and that's just fine. Whatever you can make work. If you want to do them individually or only 2 or 3 at a time, it's whatever's most comfortable for you. It's not a contest and it's not a race. Now the directions for mine say that I need to cut 10 2.5 by 12 inch strips, and this is on my purples. My ruler is exactly 12 inches, so I can line up wherever I want this way, but try and get it straight with the 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to line the edge of my ruler up with the edge of my fabrics. And I only need 10 of these, but I'm going to go ahead and cut all 11 and then just take one of them out and not use it. And everybody will be cutting 12-inch strips first. So there I've got my first stack. Now the next one I need to do 10 inches. So I'm going to go up to my 10-inch mark and cut my next stack. And it's worth taking the time to really line things up good, because I only have to cut once. Nice and slow through those 11 layers, no problem. And then I might want to move this over a little bit. And I'm just being careful to keep everything lined up. And 8-inch strips are my next one. And they do recommend that you do the longest ones first. That way you know you've got enough. Which it should all work out, but you have to move the fabric less times if you do the longest cuts first. Okay, 8 inches. And then I'm down to 6 inches. So just keeping my 2.5 inches between the lines on my ruler, lining up carefully, then pushing on my ruler with the left hand and cutting with my right. I'm going to pull these over, and I just did the 6-inch ones, so now I'm down to 4 inches. That one lined up. And then 2 inches. Okay. So those are considered my darks. Oh, I didn't quite get all the way through. And that's okay. I'm just gonna peel it back a little bit and just very carefully finish that cut. That'll happen. Then I'm just going to stack them up for now and move them out of the way. And I can confirm that I did everything okay because every strip was 2 inches shorter than the last, and I can see right across that I have a difference of 2 inches on all of them, so I know I've done okay. Now I'm going to do the same with my strips that are called light strips, and these are leftovers. You can see a couple of them came close to the end of the fabric, but not completely. So for my light strips, I need to start with 8.5 inch strips or pieces. So I'm going to line up on my ruler, and I'm at 8.5. Got that one done. And this is where it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So here you can see my 9 fabrics a little easier. And my pattern for this size calls for 22 8.5 inch strips. So now I'm working on the math. If I do another set of 8.5 inch pieces, then I know I'll have 18, and that's most of the way there. If I get all the way through them. So there's 18 of them. And instead of cutting another set of 8.5, because I only need 4 more, I'm going to go ahead and cut my 6.5 inch strips next, because I need 11 of those. Okay, so now I'll have 9 of them. Set those aside. I know I need 11 4.5 inch strip pieces. So I'm going to cut my 4.5 inch pieces. And this is also that I can leave these 9 fabrics layered up together for right now. And then I need 21 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to cut my 2.5 inch, 9 of them, and another set of 2.5. So there's 18 of them. So I either have a little bit of an issue with my mat or blade, or I'm not cutting quite hard enough because I'm not getting all the way through sometimes. But that's as much of what I'll be cutting with the full 9 layers. Now what I need to do is go back and figure out what I need to make up here. And I have to choose my fabrics. And now these are going to be fabrics in this part of the pattern. So I kind of going to have to balance out a little bit. How I want to do this. Let's see, I need 4 more (8.5 inch) pieces. I think I'm going to take the top 2 this one, And these pieces are small enough now I can just layer them up and they're not going to go too far. I think I'll just take this one too. So I'm doing 8.5 inches to finish those up. So I had 18. There's 22 now. So that pile's done. And I need 2 more of the 6.5 and 2 more of the 4.5. And maybe I'm gonna not do the lightest one. So I'm gonna do these 2 for my 6.5. I think I'm going to do these 2 for my 6.5. So many decisions. So 6.5. 4.5. There's my 4.5. And I had 18. I need 3 more 2.5 inch pieces. And I think I'm going to use these 3. No right answer, no wrong answer. Individual decisions. Okay, and then I can get these out of the way. So now I should have 21 2.5 inch squares. And for me, that is all the cutting that I needed to do. If you're doing the larger ones, you just continue with what the directions say. You'll be doing 20 pieces or 40 pieces for the next size up, the 47.5 by 55 or whatever it was. And the largest one, you'll be doing 32 of each and 64. So just continue with that, and then we'll pick up from there next week and start sewing and laying things out. More decisions. So hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you run into any problems or questions. We'll see you next week. Thanks.